question.
I am, yes.
Is this going to be available in some sort of booklet or book? Better?
I don't know. The president, the program there, well, President Pierre used to get and I'm not sure how you can.
Microphone?
I'm not sure how you can incorporate that into a portable file. I have to find out. So it's being filmed, and we maybe can make it available in that way. It wouldn't be quite the same, but maybe we'll try to put it up on YouTube. So now we're going to reintroduce you to Stephen Clement. Thanks to the Marine Bag HSBC, and also Stephen Clement III has kindly refurbished the painting and the frame, and it looks very much at home in this setting. I think you'll agree.
When the house was completed, what was the estimated cost?
$300,000 in 1912. And that's hard to figure today because that, numerically, that ramps up to about 6 or 7 million, but you couldn't build this house for 6 or 7 million. This is probably a $20 million house to recreate like this. So it was a substantial investment, however you look at it. Yes. It's local limestone. When you come in from the airport, you go by cuts in the road that show the same limestone. And it's the limestone they had to cut through for the Erie Canal. The locks come through this limestone. It's a big part of the local geology. Steve.
Can you talk about E.B. Green's workshop and the people who worked with him and the scale of architects and trainees?
I don't really know anything about the office. I just found that picture online. It's a nice, big, generous one. I think it's tall because in the summer, the heat would go up and kind of an early version of air conditioning, put the heat in the ceiling. But he must have had a fairly big office. There are about 20 people in that picture. And the scale of work that he did is phenomenal. I mean, he did over 100 buildings. He probably did more than that, but he did 100 buildings with note, I'd be willing to guess. And they were all, none of them were easy. I mean, look at all the detail. They would have draftsmen who could put those sleeve suspenders on and their eye shades, literally, and they could bat out all this detail. They just knew how to do it. You know, they could draw it really quickly. So E.B. Green himself was out, working with the owners, and the draftsmen were very skilled. Were doing all this very complicated work. John.
At any given time, what was the maximum number of people actually living there?
Well, Mrs. Clement lived here the whole time, and she had a staff, according to the census, of about 5 people. And then various members of the family would come and camp out here during the Depression. These rooms upstairs are enormous, and so they would live here for a while and then they go back to their houses. But it held quite a few people. Wicks. Yeah, he was his partner. I don't know much about him. There's a website. One of the Wicks family members is trying to resurrect his reputation. Not that it ever fell out of favor, as far as I know, but I think this descendant is trying to assign a few more of the things to Wicks as opposed to only to Green. So, but there's some nice pictures on the website of their work. Yeah, partly because it's a narrow lot for a house this big. Mr. Tripp sold this lot next door to Mr. Gratwick, so they're kind of, compared to the suburban sprawl that they were in the 1850s, it was tighter. So he would have you drive in and get out under there was a big wrought iron glass porte cochere, and you'd get out under, which would have been handy this morning, to get it into the house. Then the car would keep going and park somewhere in the back. So it was more of a, not that many people walked here probably, so they would drive up to the side. And that's a nice way of preserving the whole facade, not having to have a front door to have a nice composition. Yes?
Who's the contractor?
I used to know, and I'm afraid I can't tell you. It's probably Chuck. Do you know who the contractor is? Well, Chuck Lechuzas here, who has a website you all should go look at. It's called buffaloah.com, or buffaloarchitecturalhistory.com. Yeah, the name is not familiar, but we could look that up. We'll put that on his website as soon as we find out. But Chuck's website is really worth seeing. He's cataloged how many buildings do you think? 500 buildings? Yeah, in some detail. So I really recommend that website to you. And you can Google Buffalo architecture, and that's the first one that pops up. Anybody else? Yeah. 1913 to 1941. But you never moved in, which is really a shame. Taxes, in a word. Taxes and a huge maintenance. You can imagine heating this place. And the furnace was in the garage, so they were heating the backyard on the way into the house. It was a great big
And the other thing to remember also is taxes, but also the Second World War was underway. And the Red Cross was hugely involved in the war relief effort and, taking care of soldiers and, sending people overseas and all of that. And our work was expanding. And we had 5 or 6 locations in different parts of the city because we were just exploding with activity. And a lady by the name of Margaret Lois, who was a longtime employee who knew Mrs. Clement, and he actually directed the Red Cross movement to this building, told me many years ago that the building committee, there was a plea put out into the community that the Red Cross needed larger space to handle the war relief efforts that were underway. And there was a building committee that was put together to find a new location for the Red Cross, and they were offered 5 mansions. And the building committee picked this one. I think they did a pretty good job.
Where did Mrs. Clement go after she left
She
here?
went to the Park Lane.
I think she went to the Campanile.
You're right, I'm sorry, the Campanile. I was picturing the Campanile and said,
Your grandparents and mine moved to the Park Lane.
right. Yeah, the Campanile. Yes? Well, I never lived here. So my fondest memory is coming here with my father and having him poking at panels and having them open. I mean, as a kid, that was pretty special. My father remembered it, and his generation remember it very fondly. They would spend Christmases here, and the 2 youngest girls, Bushy and Petey, we're a nicknaming family, as the youngest would lead the procession in at Christmas time with candles. And the tree would be lit up and the presents were in the trees. And, Bushy was remembering that to me recently, what a thrill that was for the 2 little girls to lead the family into this big room for Christmas. Yes? I think this house in 737 was across the street, which was torn down when I was 12. My father had a historical gene, and which he passed on. And we would go by a building, and he would say, "That's your great-great-grandfather's house. This is your great-grandfather's house. This is your grandfather's house. Your great-grandfather's. The family built that office building. This is the bank that he built." So there was a lot of architecture associated with the family. So I think, and then Uncle Merrill became an architect. I never met. He died 3 years before I was born. I would love to have met him. He was very kind, apparently. So there was a certain ownership of buildings, and the role model was there. And my mother was an artist. She painted and drew. So I think that also influenced. Yeah.
So other than the taxes in World War II, was there any particular deep connection between the family and the Red Cross?
I'm not sure. I don't really know. Yep.
Do you still live in Buffalo?
No, I live in Madison, Connecticut. My sister, Carolyn Tripp Clement Clark, lives in Orchard Park. She's the remaining Buffalonian who along with Jamie Clement. Where are you? There you are. Who's my first cousin, is East Aurora. And you're the only 2, I think, along with Carolyn's kids. So, yes.
There was a house in East Aurora, a house in the country.
What about it?
The house in the country in East Aurora. I never forgot.
I'm sorry, what's the question?
House in East Aurora.
What happened to it? It was sold in 1943 after my great-grandmother died, and with a similar reason behind it. The five surviving children didn't want it. It was a great big thing. So it was sold, and it burned down in 1971, which is a shame. It was a beautiful house. And the family would go back and forth by train. My great-grandfather would leave the bank at Maine across from Maine and Seneca, walk down to the Exchange Street Railroad Station, get on the train, and it would take him right to the East Aurora. And then the station wagon would pick him up and take him to the house. And that's where the word station wagon comes from. The car that would go to the station and take people to their house. And his driveway, there was a front drive and a back drive. The back drive was called a long drive, and he made that because he didn't like the county roads were dusty. So he paved his driveways, and so the car would take him up the back drive to get him off the driveway, off the street. Yeah.
I have a question for Nancy. It was more for us to get in 41, what was the nature of the Red Cross's activities? This was all around the board, what was happening or what was happening here?
Yeah, I mean, it's important to understand that we like to think about, the American Red Cross as maybe the beginnings of the Red Cross, but that's really not true. The Red Cross is an international institution that was founded in Geneva, Switzerland by a Swiss citizen by the name of Henri Dunant after the Battle of San Marino in, 18-something or other. So, actually, and we all know that Claire Garden was the founder of the American Red Cross. But the American Red Cross is only one of about 160 international Red Cross societies around the world. So the American Red Cross is the largest piece of the international Red Cross. But there are sister societies all over the world. And, we were helping our sister societies in Europe and other places with the war relief effort that was going on, at the time. So even though the United States, actually joined the war, after the building was donated to us, the American Red Cross was very much involved in war relief efforts because of what we did with the other international societies.
Anybody else? Question? Okay.
Could I just have a
Yeah.
last word with my cousin Carolyn, because I think I'm Stephen and she's Carolyn, and I think we should come up and be related. But Peter and Nancy must stay up here because you're really both the reasons that we're here. So here's Carolyn and here's Stephen, many generations later. But I think what's most important are these two people here. And if it weren't for both of you, we wouldn't be here. And I think in some ways, certainly this event wouldn't have happened. And we might not even have been in this building. Through the years, Nancy really has worked hard to get the people to value this. She, I know, has faced down boards of trustees who said this is too expensive. Let's do explorations and think about moving elsewhere. And they've done feasibility studies, and they always have found out the identity of the Red Cross of Buffalo is 786 Delaware Avenue. So it's really in large part that we're still in the music room. And then Peter, your lifelong interest in our family history has enlightened all of us so deeply, and that 30-minute condensation was absolutely brilliant, and what a gift. So to Peter and Nancy, many, many cheers for Carolyn.
Thank you so much. And before we finish, I'm going to tell you the most infamous, famous story about the building. And, when people come in here, they always ask three questions. Who lived here? Do you have a secret passage? Because it is the house haunted. Okay. So the answer to, the first question is, obviously the Clement family lived here. Is there a secret passage? Well, of course there is. And there's lots of other secret places in the building that we like to show off. And, if those of you that stay for a tour will get to see many of them. And is the house haunted? Well, I don't know about that, but I'll tell you a story and then you can decide for yourself. So Peter showed you pictures of the magnificent Christmas tree that always went in the front window, always covered with white lights. And it was a family tradition, and legend has it that when Carolyn Tripp Clement gave the building to the Red Cross, the one request that she made of us was that we continue the family tradition of keeping the Christmas tree in the front window with the white lights. So we did that for years and years and years and years and years. So in the middle 1990s or so, Children's Hospital began their Festival of Trees, a fundraiser for the local Children's Hospital, which is now called Women Children's Hospital. And it was a big, Christmas gathering and, auction and all of this. And trees were decorated by garden clubs and groups and whatever. And then the trees were auctioned off at a gala dinner. So many of you are familiar with the name Shelkoff. Paul Shelkoff, some of you, Chuck, you certainly know Mr. Shelkoff. And Mr. Shelkoff was a guest at the gala dinner, and he bought one of the Christmas trees at the auction. And if you knew Mr. Clement, or Mr. Shelkoff, he was about this big, and just a large man with a big booming voice, and he scared the heck out of me. And I was a very junior executive director at the time, and he called me on the phone and he said, "Nancy." "Yes, sir." "I have a tree for you. Don't buy a tree. I got stuck buying a tree at the Children's Hospital auction. I'm having it delivered to the Red Cross, so you don't need to get a Christmas tree this year." "Okay, great." Tree shows up a couple of days later, and it's covered with colored lights. So we've got a choice. Either we not keep with family tradition, or I get Mr. Shelkoff really mad. So it was a pretty easy choice to make, because I was afraid of Mr. Shelkoff. So we put the tree one up in the front window. Next morning, at that time my office was in the hotel house, which is at the first house on Summer Street. I got a call from the maintenance person over here who said, "Nancy, I came in this morning and the Christmas tree is on the floor." Okay, well, pick it back up. So, did that. 3 nights in a row, the Christmas tree was on the floor. So I said, okay, take the lights off, put the white lights on the tree, and the Christmas tree stood for the rest of the Christmas season. So, those of us that have the good fortune to work in this building every day feel the presence of, your ancestors in this building. So I believe that Mrs. Clement is a presence in this building. And there have been all, we lost a cleaning lady once because Mr. Clement told her she was doing a terrific job one night when she was here. There have been voices heard in the building at very odd hours, so there's all kinds of, great folklore associated with the building, but I always like to tell a Christmas tree story. So it's a great one, and we still observe the tradition, and trust me, we are never putting anything but white lights on. So again, it's been a great pleasure to have all of you here over this weekend, and many thanks to Peter for all of the work. That was obviously a labor of love, so thank you so much for all the hard work that you did. And I think we've got some folks that are willing to give a tour at this point, so if those of you that would like to stay and get a tour of the mansion, we're happy to take you through our house.